All right. Well, thanks for joining us for a Firm Foundation podcast. We are live, James.
Hello. Hello.
and it's good to have you here with us. And, I want to go over a couple things. We are days away from our spring fundraising event and over at the Danes Hall. So I took a picture. I'll put it up on the screen and people can see what it's looking like in our office right now. It's kind of a hot mess.
It is.
Yeah, but it's in the picture here's Megan Fletcher, and we have Karen, and of course our office staff helping put baskets together. But it's all coming together pretty well. And again, the tickets are no longer available, but this is the event we're talking about. Of course, the Sound of Hope annual spring fundraisers. So we're raising funds for the operations of Foundations for Living. And James, as I was telling you, on Friday I pick up our guest speaker from the airport, so that's going to be pretty cool. But the reason why we're doing it today, our podcast, is that I asked James to be a part of our show today. And I got to know James, a while ago, probably when I first started here. And since then, I think what really catapulted me wanting to know more about what you do is our Christmas volunteer party. And you mentioned that you were a poet. You had a few books out. Well, actually, you had one coming out at that time.
Yep.
And I said, well, we certainly need to celebrate that and everything that goes with it. And so here you are, and as we've said, you've made the circuit, and the church I pastor, you've been on a couple other shows, one with the radio station. And so I thought, if you want to just give us a little nutshell, talk about who you are and what brought out all this writing.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me anyway for first. So yeah, I've got 3 published books of poetry out right now. I got a 4th coming out this August. I guess I always wanted to be a writer since I was a little kid. My grandmother was a published author for Harlequin romance, believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was a detail you left out.
Yeah, it is. And what's funny is I have the book, but I've never read it because it's just one of those things. I don't want to read a romance book written by your grandmother.
That classifies as you.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure. So, it's always been a thing, but like everything else, life takes over. So there was jobs and work. And for me, a lifetime of substance abuse. A funny story in the beginning was I remember I was between jobs when I was like 30 years old. I'm 52 now.
Okay.
And I went to my granny. I was so excited. I told her, I said, I got an idea for a book. I'm going to do this. And she kind of grinned at me. She's like the nicest lady on the planet. And I was like, what? She goes, you haven't lived enough yet.
Oh, wow.
So, I was like, I'm going to show her. And I went and sat down, and then on a typewriter, believe it or not. And I tried pounding. So I got about 10 pages in, and I went, you know what? She's right. I hadn't lived enough yet.
That's interesting because I don't quote me on this. I think it's Taylor Swift. I know I don't listen to her, but but there was an interesting interview because when she was younger, she really had a good voice. She was a little more country style and stuff. And it may be a different musician, but anyways, the gist of the story is that a person heard her, and I read this in the Rolling Stone magazine, that shows my age, but it was an interview that took place, and they in the record exec basically said, yeah, she's awesome, good tone, great songs. Imagine how much more awesome she'll be when she is hurt.
Yep.
I thought, wow, I never thought about that.
And yeah, pain plays into it. And, and the other thing that does for me, especially, is catharsis. It is therapeutic for me to get through, my lifelong addiction to drugs and alcohol by writing it out.
Yeah.
I attend a lot of 12-step meetings. I know we have a couple of them here at Foundations. Which we're forever grateful for that, just having the space to do that.
Well, and our newest one, the Drug Addicts Anonymous.
Yep.
Yeah,
most definitely. And, so you get through that program, and when you sober up, taking drugs and alcohol out of your life is like the first step, but it's a very small step in the journey. You start learning about character defects and emotional maturity and stuff like that. And, in step work, the 4th step is taking a log and an inventory of that stuff. And when I got to that point, I had a really hard time. And then I picked up, the first book, and I was like, you know what? It's all right here. It's this first one was just basically a log of the last year and a half of my active addiction, and maybe the first couple of weeks of sobriety. And
that's what I was going to ask about that first book. If I can hold it up for the people that are going to watch. So where were you at in life when you wrote that book?
I was in a bad place. I was in a really bad place. I started compiling it when COVID, the basic shutdown happened. I was deemed unessential at my day job.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Unessential. Okay.
Yep.
And in a world where we don't want labels,
right? For sure. And so I decided, you know what, if I'm ever going to have a shot to do this full time and as a living, this was the time to do it. So I started compiling it. I knew absolutely nothing about poetry. I'll tell you that from the get-go.
Okay.
I ran across a friend that teaches at one of the community colleges up north. And that person had told me, you should submit this and see what happens. And I didn't believe her. And in the middle of a bender one night, I just, for fun, I sent it to one publisher, and they took it.
Wow. So when you got into thinking that you might like poetry, did you have like a go-to author that you were reading more? And strike me a little more of an Edgar Allan Poe.
I like Poe, but Bukowski is big
for
me. And actually my influences, I always tell people, probably my biggest influence, the voice that I hear in my head when I write, is Anthony Bourdain, believe it or not.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And, Hunter Thompson for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just the color and the words that he uses. But Truman Capote, there's a lot of writers, Jack Kerouac, that I like.
That was a fantastic movie about Capote.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, it's funny because they took it and then they said, well, you got to edit it. And they sent me through their author school, how to do this sort of thing and how to edit properly and go through and get it ready for them. And that whole process was gone. I don't remember it at all.
Yeah.
It was a fairly rough time in my life. And then the book came out and I couldn't open it. I had in between the time where the book came out and when I submitted it, I had gotten sober for a few weeks but I couldn't open it. It was just too painful. And I probably didn't open it for like the first year.
Wow.
Yeah. The first year that it was out, but I continued to write. And the second book, My Manic Mind, pretty much was my foray into sobriety and starting to work on myself. And
hold this
like
one
that.
Up too.
Yep. So there's a lot of addiction stuff in there, but a lot of stuff, moments of clarity that I had, and so
pardon my coughing.
You're all good.
Coming off of a sinus infection.
No
so
doubt
yeah.
About it. And the thing is, for me, it's personal. And you talk about influences. Miles Davis, a jazz trumpet player, was another big influence for me. And Miles never kept any of his current recordings around. He would say, that's old stuff. I don't need to have that. So for me, I think it was kind of an excuse almost, because it was too painful to open up the book, and even to some extent the second book. So I would just say, well, I like Miles Davis. Miles didn't look at his old stuff. Why should I look at my old stuff? Kind of thing. And so it worked. And now it's kind of become a habit. I publish something and I kind of put it away, and I don't really go over it and look at it very, very much at all. When I worked on the third book, which just came out this past Valentine's Day, this My Nature Darkly.
Yeah.
That one, for some reason, I had a shift, and I could open this one. I do readings live out of the book, and I don't know. I think it's just the book that is most like me, who I was supposed to be when I started this journey. Back using when I was like 8 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, and you read some selections from that book for, when you were on the radio and over at the church too.
Yeah. Yeah, the selection I read there at 54981, I wrote when I came here to Wapaka. I'll tell you, I left I packed my house up north, and I left there at like 10:30 at night. I got down here at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I didn't know if I had come to town here honestly to just die.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And that's the thing about, addiction is you hit that point of hopelessness that, it's hard to explain unless you've been through it. You get to a point there where, you don't know if you can stop. I mean, I lived over 40 years as an addict, an active addict, functional active addict. I mean, I had.
Well, yeah. And you mentioned that you ran a construction company
Sure.
during those
Yep.
times.
Yep. Construction company. I was in mold, water, and fire. I mean, I did jobs. I think we had like as many as 39 employees the last place that I worked that I was in charge of, and none of them would have even known.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's, so it's somebody that's in society, as a functioning addict, as you say, how, do people ever pry into that, wondering or asking, or you're pretty good at keeping it?
I think that I think that it's so prevalent today that, most people wouldn't even know. And
Yeah.
and the thing is, when you start, so another guy that I read a lot is Malcolm Gladwell. He says, 10,000 hours of practice to become an expert at something. When you start using it at 8 years old, and then you get into your professional life in your 30s and 40s, you've got your 10,000 hours in being an addict. So you get very good at putting that mask on and showing people what you want them to see, and keeping them at arm's length.
So at 8 years old, I mean, was it the lifestyle you were brought up in, or was it just things you experienced in the town you were living?
I had probably the most idyllic, normal childhood for the most part that there was. This is, and that's the thing that I think, people maybe don't understand about addiction. It isn't as much nurture as it is nature. This was in my head. I can remember picking up a cocktail at a Christmas party when I was a kid and drinking it, and that switch went on in my head, and I knew. I might not have known that I was drunk. I might not have known what, but I knew that I liked the way that it felt.
Yeah.
And I also knew that I wanted more. And there's really nothing. I wasn't, a guy that was. I mean, we had a middle-class family, a pretty normal upbringing.
Yeah.
I did well in school for the most part. And I think that I hit it very well.
Yeah. And so at this point in your life, I mean, you've celebrated how many months now?
It's going on 19 months. I just got an 18-month key tag from one of the 12-step programs.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
But your limitations. So I assume you don't put yourself in scenarios where that would be.
Well, I mean, that was the part. I spent the last about 15 years up in northern Wisconsin. And when I had made the decision to get sober, I knew I had to come somewhere that I didn't know anybody. I had to try to control everything and stay away from everything that was leading me down that path. So I knew one guy that I grew up with, and he didn't use. He had a travel trailer here in Wapaka.
Oh.
And I contacted him because I knew he'd come, and I stayed there. And then, the first 3 days I was in town here, I just white knuckled it.
Yeah.
And I got to a 12-step meeting on Monday. And I'll say, this community and my sponsor in that program, they saved my life, because without them and programs like what you guys offer here, I mean, it just, I can't thank, this community enough, because I was literally on death's doorstep when I got here.
That is something to celebrate in this community. I knew of the 12-step programs before I started here, but once I got to know them and see the people that were attending, by just me working here, you get to see people and meet people, and they are some fantastic groups and run by fantastic people.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is, in that first meeting, I didn't know anybody. I came in and I sat down, and I've never asked the guys that were in there what they thought that first time. Maybe they don't remember. I don't know. But somebody in that meeting said, the program is the program, and if you follow it, you can stay clean and sober. But to get the benefits from the program, you have to buy into the spirituality of the faith end of it.
Okay.
And, yeah, you have to believe in a power greater than yourself.
Yeah. And for, different people, they have to be okay with that definition of whatever that may look like for you.
Most definitely. I mean, for me, the program, we call it God, and there's people that don't like that. They call it good orderly direction or something. But
Mhm.
there's people who have their higher power. I've heard people say their higher power was a doorknob or a water heater or the group itself.
Okay.
Whatever it is, if that power is greater than yourself, that's the spirituality portion of the program is the part where we start really reaping the benefits.
Yeah. And, by default, it would come off as, to some that don't know me, well, you're a pastor. For me, I'm a pastor. And, well, then how can you handle those sort of situations? And, a person's got to look at that and just say, they're moving forward,
Right.
they're getting out of all of that. And, whatever that looks like to them, that's what's going to help them get through.
I could share a story. I mean, they call it the conversion experience in the program. And I was locked up 2 years ago in June on a bond hearing. I had done something wrong. And I'd spent 6 weeks in jail working out because that's really all there is to do there.
Yeah.
Eat and work out. And so after a couple of weeks, I would grab these water bottles and I would use them as dumbbells when I walked around. And when I got out, I started walking. The jail I was in Rhinelander. My house was in St. Germain. So it's like 25 miles. When you leave jail, you don't care. You just point yourself in a direction and go, happy that you're free.
Yeah.
And it took me probably an hour and a half to figure out that I probably wasn't in the best shape to be walking 25 miles. It was getting dark.
And, what time of year was this?
This was it was warm enough.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was in August, late August.
I feel bad for the guys that we serve here. They go in summer,
mm-hmm.
and our system here, they'll release them at 2 a.m, and all they have is their shorts, Crocs, and a t-shirt in the middle of winter.
Yeah.
So.
It's rough. And the thing is, they're just going to go because they're happy to be out of there, breathing fresh air and stuff. So what I had done was, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, what am I going to do? It's a long way to go. And I'm standing on the side of the road. And I remembered from being in jail 2 months before that in a neighboring county that I had met this pastor from a local church. And his church was maybe a mile or so up the highway. We're talking about Thursday night at like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, there is not going to be anybody at this church. What am I going to do? And I look down at my feet and there is a bottle of water, same brand, same looking bottle of water I had been carrying with me for, the last 6 weeks. And I said to myself, let there be one car in this parking lot. And I walked up there. I didn't ask for let there be somebody, anything, just let there be one car. And I walked up there and there was one car. And then I said, let this guy, let that not just be a parking lot and let somebody be in there to answer the door. And somebody answered the door. They called the pastor. He gave me a ride home. And I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about when it comes to spirituality, is looking for those signs that God puts down for us.
Yeah.
Because they're there. If you pay attention for them, they're there. And if there is something bigger than us, us as human beings, the affliction that we have, drug addicts, it is a disease. It's not our fault and it's not a choice.
And that's one of the things I wish more people would take time to educate themselves on, is that, it's still in the society today. People look at it as, no, it's a choice.
Right.
And it was officially declared what year that it was a disease?
1982.
Yeah. So, and it really is just that. And it would behoove people that think it is a choice, to sit down with somebody like James, or, go to an open meeting, and just, in a respectful manner, say, help me understand,
Yeah. And I think that's the next step here, is that, this has gotten to the point. I think anybody out there watching this, or anybody that you could talk to, pick a random person on the street. Drug addiction has touched everyone.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that everyone knows an addict, but they know someone that knows an addict, or probably is less than one person removed away from knowing somebody that suffered an overdose, unfortunately, today. And knowing that it's not a choice, and ending the stigma, the public thinking that addicts are bad in some way or something like that. It really is not not our fault.
Yeah. But what is our responsibility is to, even if a person doesn't go to a meeting, just anybody in common life, just to encourage,
Yeah.
don't make a judgment call. In the church world, they would say there, but for the grace of God, go I, but even then there becomes an argument over that. Like, okay, so that kind of elevates, it's kind of a trite saying, but really what we should be saying is if I don't come from that background, I don't come from a family that has that background, then get with somebody and understand what is going on, especially in a small community with Foundations for Living, working with somebody, and with Hope and other places. The city is doing a lot for it. So it would be wise of somebody to say, can I come into Foundations and can you pair me up with somebody just so I can talk to a recovering addict, and just understand this thing.
Yeah. And I think, once we get into, establish a period of sobriety, a lot of the onus for the way the community looks at addicts, or the thing that we can do to help end the stigma, is to practice cultural competency. We have to represent ourselves in a certain way, because honestly, the only way that we end this, we stop the overdoses and we get people the help that they need, is we need the community support.
Yeah.
The stigma has to end, and the community has to love us as much as we love ourselves in sobriety. They have to understand us. No contempt prior to investigation. If there's something you don't understand, ask somebody, because I think they'll be more than willing to sit down and talk to you and explain their story to you.
So, honest question here regarding community support. How's Waupaca doing?
I think they're doing really well. Yeah, I do. So I can tell you, just in the last 18 months, we did not have meetings 7 days a week when I got here. We do now. I think there's 17 meetings over the course of the week, just within the city limits of Waupaca here. Of course, you got Stevens Point up there and neighboring communities, but peer support, you guys at Foundations helping people out. We learn how to live a certain way, and I think that way is survival as addicts. But when we come out, the roadblocks that we face are integrating back into society. And that's where people like Foundations for Living, With Hope, Impact, places like that really help us get our feet under us, or love us until we can love ourselves.
Yeah. Yep. And a person to help you, or anybody, doesn't have to come from that background. It's just being willing to be a support.
Pretty much, if somebody has empathy for, you don't have to have lived experience to help an addict. What you do have to have is good listening skills and kindness and maybe a little bit of empathy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, good. So, your books,
yeah.
Life, Love, and there they are. They all are. You can go right on. They can go on to Amazon to get those.
They can, and I can send you a link later. You could post.
All right.
Yeah,
we'll do that. So, and if you have any questions for James, by all means, you can message him. He's on Facebook, and he's very reachable. But and if you're looking to learn more about the programs Foundations offers, stop in. We'll give you a tour. And I know you've mentioned to me when you have an open meeting that you'll let us know. And
yeah, most definitely.
I would be there, because admittedly, I haven't come through that, but I would love to meet and understand more,
Yeah. And I think that's what it takes. It takes, it takes a village in order to solve this problem. And to be honest with you, there's too many people dying. I've been here 18 months. I've lost 11 friends.
Wow.
In 18 months that's
a lot.
Yeah. That weren't able to enjoy sobriety like I am. They didn't find their way. But that doesn't have to happen. There are enough resources out here. And I believe that the city of Waupaca and the nonprofit organizations and the addict community is doing enough that we can honestly say people don't have to die from this anymore.
Right. Yep. I wholeheartedly agree with that. And, everybody can do their part to, be there and make a difference. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for being on with us.
Definitely. Thank
And
you for having me.
yeah. And again, if you want to visit us online, fflwapaka.org, stop in. We'll give you a tour anytime. And if you're coming to the big fundraiser event, we'll see you on Friday night. Hope
I'll
you
be
have.
there.
All right. Good.
Fantastic.
And people can chat with you there.
Yeah, most definitely.
And 2 of your books are in the giveaways.
They are. Yeah.
Good deal. All right.
Awesome.
Thanks, James.
Thank you.